So when I was thinking about how I wanted to start the podcast, this idea of the inspiration that I had originally had for More Than came to mind, where I wanted it to be more than a label, because I always felt like I really hid behind the labels that I put on myself, that society put on me, and realized that the older we get, the more multifaceted we get, like maybe those labels just don't feel right and they don't encompass who you truly are and what makes up your identity. And right when we started talking, you're like, yeah, I went through an identity crisis after I graduated college. And I'm like, okay, this is our starting point.
Yes.
So walk me through your athletic career and really how that made up your identity up until this point.
Yeah, totally. So total identity crisis, but I, growing up, played soccer and club soccer for 8 years. And then starting at 9, I did soccer and track. And then from 9 to literally 22, I ran track. So it was a very long journey with track. What was that? I'm doing the math.
I'm a long time.
9 years, no, over 9 years, 18 years, or I don't know. Math is hard. But was a track athlete for majority of my life and put a lot of my identity into track because that's what I was good at and that's what I was told I was good at and it was my talent. And it honestly wasn't until my freshman year of college when my coach made me read Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset book that I kind of changed my mindset towards my abilities and my talent, and saw them as not fixed talents that you're born and gifted with, but things that you actually have to work hard at. But for the longest time, I tied my entire identity to track. And then when I graduated, I ended up working for a large beauty company in New York, in the big city, living the dream, or so I thought, and ended up realizing working at this big beauty company, I was like, wait, this is truly not what I'm passionate about. I like beauty, but I'm not it's not my end all be all, and had to come to terms in my small 0 square feet apartment in New York with 0 closets that I was I'm actually really unhappy with where I'm at and who I am. And I don't really know who I am. I've put all my identity into track for so long and my abilities and what that looked like and my talent and have now shifted my talent to this job that I don't actually like and I don't actually think I'm is my passion. So then I kind of lost myself of I'm wow, I'm actually really depressed living here. I don't you don't really see the ground because there's so many buildings everywhere and I need to just touch grass. I just need to touch grass and had to really reason with myself in the sense of I was so depressed. I was so anxious. I would have anxiety attacks at work. And had to reason with myself. I'm if I stay in the city and live in New York without knowing who I am or what I like to do and just continue to work for this company because that's what I think I'm supposed to do or what people expect me to do or what I've told my Instagram followers that I'm doing, I will not survive. I need to take a beat and reset and go home and figure out what I like to do, what are my favorite colors, what do I just enjoy, what gives me passion. So track was such a large part of my life and I had to reason and talk to myself. I'm yes, that's a part of your life, but it's not your whole life. And it wasn't until I took a reset and went home, started a new job at a company that I was I'm not necessarily passionate about this, but it gives me this space to figure out what I am passionate about, and started just running to run, just to run, not because I had times that I had to meet, not because I was trying to win a championship, just literally running on a trail, that I started to enjoy movement more and enjoy running more and reestablish my relationship with even working out and with running that now 5 years past, now I'm running halves and marathons, but it's completely changed my relationship with sport because I've been able to have that time away and actually reestablish what that looks like for me.
There's so much of your story that I'm ready to dive into because I'm so curious. Yeah. One, I really relate to the whole living in Manhattan and wanting to touch grass. Unless you're going to Battery Park, or Central Park, where's grass? I don't know. I was also living in a 400 square foot apartment, living the dream, but at the same time having these anxiety attacks. What do I actually want? Yeah. But your journey before getting to New York, you went to Harvard.
Yeah.
Let's just have a moment for that. I feel like I'm honored in your presence. Wow, that's exciting. I actually don't know if I know anybody that went to Harvard.
I love that.
But was that like a lifelong, was that your goal to go there?
It's so funny because when I was like 5, I was like, I want to go to Harvard. I had no idea what Harvard was, like truly had no idea. But I feel like it was a goal when I was younger. And then it was always like, you want to go to Harvard. And coming from like a Nigerian, Sierra Leonean like background, like it's like Harvard or nothing is like kind of the funny phrase that a lot of Nigerian children will use when speaking about culture, but also their parents and like the expectations. And so like once I got into Harvard, I was like, okay, great. I would like check this cultural box in a lot of ways, but ran track there. So that was its own like journey too. And people always ask me, they're like, was Harvard hard? And I was like, I would say it was hard, but it was also one of those things where it's like, it was truly a transformative experience. Like I came in with so many like fears and imposter syndrome aspects to like my journey of like, okay, well, I'm an athlete and I'm a Black woman. Like those are things that people, even in high school, were like, well, you only got into Harvard because you're Black, or you haven't only got into Harvard because you're an athlete. So there are already things that you're kind of faced against that you're like nervous about entering as a freshman. And I just remember like our dean said, don't compare, connect. And like that like rang so true of my experience at Harvard of like realizing like if you sit there and compare your journey to other people, like you're always going to come up short because everyone is at the top of their game in whatever they've done in their lives. Like it's all about connecting and learning about other people, and like the people is what made the experience. So yeah, that was like the biggest thing with going to Harvard. And like I say it's an acquired taste. Like I truly, like freshman year, I was like, I'm quitting the team, I'm moving back to Seattle, and I am going to University of Washington. Like I did not have a great experience. Like I swear, like freshman year of college is like the freshman year, like, or the first year of getting out of college, like your first year of adulthood is like your freshman year of college all over again. And no one talks about that, but like it is tough. And it is a challenge, but you eventually learn and you grow and you figure out like your groove. But like, it's just like pressing restart on your freshman year of college again.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you're moving across the country.
Yeah.
Did you know anybody going into your freshman year?
Yeah. So I knew we had a little track baddies squad is what we called ourselves as freshmen coming in. We were like the track baddies. And like, as an 18-year-old, I look back at that and I'm like, why did we go into college calling ourselves that?
Because at the time it was sick.
Yeah, it was. And people still refer to us as the track baddies, like, which is so
It was track baddies?
Yeah, track baddies.
You were ahead of your time. I like this. Track baddies.
It was like 5 of us, and then it ended up being 4 of us, but we were like track baddie Ngozi, like track baddie Anna, Ebola, Gabby. So such a funny time. But we had all done a pre-frosh program together. It was like dorm crew, so we were like literally cleaning dorms. All of us were like, oh, we'll just do it for fun, we'll meet new people. So we came in freshman year, like we had Visitas like our senior year going in, and we're able to like connect. And then we came in freshman year before school started, and we're all able to connect. And like I truly owe like my track buddies my life, because they got me through so much in college of like that first year of like feeling lonely and not really knowing anybody, but also like first time away from like family in that way, first time like having to deal with like a new coach, new team, new dynamics, like school, like all those things. And I just remember like I always say like I think we're trauma bonded, like truly trauma bonded from like freshman year of college, that like anything we go through, we know how to handle it because we have each other. So yeah.
Yeah. Something I've always really admired about sports is how much it builds a community over a shared passion.
Yeah.
That when people can connect over that shared passion, but also like have that actual human connection as well, that's rare, because I do find that a lot of people like outside of that sport, they can't really connect with the people in that sport, but it brings people from all different backgrounds, all different belief systems over one common thing.
Yeah.
So when you started running, was it simply out of, I love to do this, or you brought up like kind of the cultural pressure that you felt like?
Yeah.
Do you think you did it because you felt you needed to, or was it a passion?
I would say similar to like how I started soccer, I was good at it. And so I automatically was like, oh, I should play forward in soccer because I'm fast and I'm good at it. And I came to a point when I was, I think, 13 or 14, where I was playing up a year in soccer. All the girls were going to high school, and I was like, I don't actually like this anymore. Like, I enjoy soccer, but I'm not playing for myself. I'm playing for my dad who played soccer, or I'm playing for other people because I'm good at it. And so that was actually the first moment that I had to like have a moment of like, do I like this? Am I passionate about this? Is this what I want to do? And I think I came to a point with track where I was like, I immediately went to track because I'm like, oh, I'm good at this. And like, I'm fast and I'm winning. And so it was like very performance based. And I will say it wasn't until I ran the New York Marathon last November that like doing like running for something outside of myself and like where it's not performance based, like I had the most fun. And I'd been running for like my entire life, but that was like one of the very few first moments that I've had the most fun when running's not tied to performance and not tied to championship or not tied to like my talent. So I will say, I think I did it originally because I was good at it. And then I convinced myself that I loved it. And it was funny. I always talk, people always were like, so do you like running? And I was like, no, I actually don't, but I'm winning. So I'm like, I enjoy this because I'm winning and because there's competition and like, I'm able to showcase my talent. But I think it wasn't until like I got out of college and started running distance that I'm like, okay, there's so much more defining passion in this of like doing this because I like it, not because I have to, but because I want to. And like even the first year out of college, I didn't run for the entire year. Like when I was in New York, I simply did not work out because I was like, no one's telling me I need to work out. No one is like telling me how much I have to lift or what I have to weigh or any of those things. Like I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to do it. So I had to really reestablish my relationship with running.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you also have to reestablish your relationship with your own mental health. Yeah. I'm sure body image comes into there. I'm sure there's a lot because when you are an athlete, you are looking at your body as a way to perform and as a vessel to be talented at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Did you feel the shift when you stopped doing that to like, did you have that like more vanity body awareness? Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, I would say I never really thought about body image when I was running track because I always had to be lifting and strong in high school. And then when I got to college, it was like something that I thought a lot about because we were constantly thinking about what we're eating and like how much we weigh and what that looks like against our speed. And like my freshman year, I was told I needed to lose 10 pounds in order to run as fast as I needed to. And I had never, ever thought about my weight as a result of my performance. And so it really tripped me up and like had problems with eating and like just what did that look like, my relationship to food. And so going and being like a year after college, trying to figure out those things out that we never really talked about. Like you talk about nutrition in regards to performance. You talk about body weight in regards to performance. You talk about mental health in regards to performance. But like now you're not necessarily performing in that same realm. So what do all those things look like? And that was the first thing and the reason why I started my podcast, because I was like, these are topics that women and active women don't talk about. Like we don't talk about nutrition. We don't talk about like self-image, body image, like all these things that have such a large impact on us and like have impacted the way we show up in the world as athletes. And now as active women, they still have an impact, but we don't have the same like support system to talk about them and talk through them. So that was like something the first year of college that I really struggled with, and was why I was like, this needs to be a conversation and a topic of a conversation, because there's so many women that like need to talk about this and are influenced by this.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. I knew we were aligned right away because I'm like, you're right up my alley.
Yeah.
Take me back to being in New York. You just got there.
Yeah.
You said you're kind of having this identity crisis and you're not doing the thing that you were good at and that you had love for. What beauty job were you working?
Yeah. So I was marketing trainee at a large beauty company called L'Oreal. So it was like a very big corporation.
Casual
very
plug.
Big corporation, which I still have so many people that like my original work wife is still there, like loved the company, but I think it just wasn't necessarily right for me. And I think when you are working in a high achieving environment for a lot of your life, and then you go to another high achieving environment, it sometimes is hard to figure out, like, if I'm not necessarily passionate about this specifically, or like it's not my passion at the time, how do I still continue to achieve and like measure myself against those standards that are not necessarily realistic? And so that was a big thing where I was like, okay, I don't necessarily enjoy this part of my career or like this brand I'm working on or what I'm doing, but like it's now impacting my mental health and it's now impacting like other aspects of my life because I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. And I'm like, well, I'm not enjoying this part of my life or my career, and therefore I'm allowing it to impact my entire life, and it impacted my mental health. I had anxiety. I just wasn't showing up as my best self because I didn't feel like I was my best self. And coming into an environment where New York is so overwhelming, like I lived in Hell's Kitchen, so didn't get Times Square sound, but I got Times Square people. So I never really felt like I had moments to just like breathe and like release and be myself and like problem solve and allow myself to feel overwhelmed. Like I felt like I was in a constant state of overwhelmed in New York. And I think it came to a head where I was like, I literally can't live like this. Like this is not normal.
Something that I really respect about you making the decision and having the self-awareness at the time to be like, I can't do this. Like it's time to go and reevaluate and remove myself from the situation is I find so many people, especially in their young 20s, they just feel like, well, maybe this is what work feels like. Maybe this is what the real world looks like. And that I just need to stick it out because I need to have this career. I need this title or I need something else. So they neglect their self-care, their mental health, and they aren't really in tune with themselves. And for you to do that at such a young age is impressive.
It was hard. And it's funny, I called it the Harvard shuffle. Like everyone, you go to school in Boston, you go to school at Harvard, and then you go to New York. And like, you're supposed to be living the dream. Like you're supposed to be like, that's just the Harvard shuffle. Like everyone and their mother I knew went to New York. And so when I was like reasoning with like going home, I was like, well, this is what everyone's doing and everyone's supposed to be having this experience. And like, even like talking to my friends, because we graduated in 2019. So right before COVID hit, and then COVID hit and everyone went home. Like everyone, there was so many of my friends that were depressed in the city and like were anxious and didn't like their jobs. But like no one really talked about it because you're supposed to enjoy it and it's what you're supposed to do. So like having that moment, I would say was probably such a blessing in disguise for me to be able to go home. Like I literally left New York a month before COVID hit. Wow. So I literally packed up, left New York, left the city in January or February. And then in March, COVID hit. And so it was like such a blessing in disguise to be able to like reset. And so many people after were like, so you're coming back to New York? And I'm like, no, I like fully moved. I will not be back. Like, see you later.
Bye.
Yeah.
So when you go home, did you move back home in with your parents?
Yeah.
Good. So it gave you the flexibility to be able to go into an old environment and create a new version of yourself. So take me through like, what are you doing during that time to try and rediscover who you are, or maybe discover for the first time who you truly are?
So I ended up working for a family friend, and she was in the healthcare space, and like my mom's in the healthcare space and is a physician. And so she's building her own company in the healthcare space, in the geriatric like arena and industry. And I was like, so not interested in geriatrics itself because that had never been a big passion. But I was like, this gives me space to do something that I haven't done and to learn from someone who's building a company and see what does this look like in this space and like how can that apply to me also wanting to be an entrepreneur and build my own business. Like how can I learn from these learnings and add to my toolkit? So I ended up taking on that role as a marketing specialist, and I was able to like the flexibility to be able to like take on that role, but then also build a podcast while I was also at home and not having to think about like, what's my rent and all those things as a 23-year-old was so nice. And also to the flexibility of having my old friends from high school that are there. Obviously we all lived very different lives and like are at different stages of life, but people that like I felt familiar with, and like, yes, they knew an old version of me, but it allowed me to recreate myself in Seattle in a different way. And I had lived there when I was like in high school. So like very different like person approaching the city as a young adult. So it just kind of gave me the freedom to do so. And that's when I started podcasting and started running more and like started to understand like, okay, wait, I'm actually really passionate about like I thought I was passionate about running, but it was like the health and wellness within running, of like approaching it more holistically, of like, in order to run well, you have to feel well. And like, that's so important, like the look good, feel good aspect. And like, that comes from within and is such a holistic approach to wellness, of like, if one part is off, the rest of it's going to be off. Like, it all has to be in some sort of equilibrium and like in tune with each other in order for you to feel your best. So like, that's when I started to really think about and discover like, okay, this part of my life has been off, but like in order, like, and that's been a big reason as to why like I've been feeling so off. And like coming back to myself in that way gave me the understanding and knowledge of like, no, this is actually what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping women understand like, it's like it's a holistic approach to wellness. Like, it's not just like one thing or the other. You have to kind of look at it in an equilibrium.
Because it's all connected.
Yeah.
It's so connected. And once you realize that, it's very freeing.
Yeah.
And I also feel like that's where like the true work starts, because so many of us will like look at just wellness or just health or just exercise, or not focus on the mental aspect. And like, you never really feel your best because you're not focusing on all avenues.
Yeah.
And I started the More Than podcast in 2020 as well, because I was so anxious to learn from other women that had different experiences that I did. And I think in a way, looking back on it, it was a way to like validate that I wasn't the only one feeling the way that I was feeling.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's where your heart for the podcast came into?
Yeah, because I think that was the biggest thing, where I was like, I sat in New York and I was like, there's no way I'm the only one going through these experiences as a former athlete. Like, there has to be this, like, there's been so many people that have transitioned from being a like high performing athlete to someone in the corporate world. Like, there has to be like other women that are experiencing this. So I interviewed pro athletes, and I interviewed nutritionists and like psychologists and like women that were in the sports realm, to understand like, how are you seeing wellness, health, wellness, and fitness? Like, how do you see that, and how do we approach it more holistically as almost healing for me to be like, okay, this is a collective identity. Like, as an athlete, whether you were a college athlete, whether you were a high school athlete, we all experience similar things as active women. And this is a collective identity and a safe place for you to be like, oh, this pro athlete was experiencing anxiety in this way. Like, so was I. Like, that's normal. Yeah.
It's definitely comforting. And especially, it allows people to be able to vocalize their own experience, and it just validates those feelings, right? That's what we all want, is just to feel like we're not alone, and that we have a sense of direction. So once you go through this kind of rebuilding your identity in Seattle, how do you end up in Austin, Texas?
Great question. So I was rebuilding my identity, started this podcast in the health and wellness space that kind of spurred me into the health and wellness space. And people are like, oh yeah, you're in health and wellness and fitness. And I was like, am I? I'm like,
I am?
Sure.
I guess I am.
Yeah. It's like imposter syndrome where you're like, I don't think I am, but okay, sure.
If you think I am.
Yeah, if you think I am, I am. So it started there, and then was like, okay, well, I think I want to get back into the brand marketing side of like working for a brand that I'm like passionate about and like see the value in, and like can really relate to the morals and values of that brand. And so ended up it's funny, I visited Austin in 2020 during COVID, during 4th of July. We were supposed to go to LA, the track baddies, but we came to Austin because my best friend Gabby lives here and she trains. She's a pro athlete here too. And so we were like, okay, we'll go to Austin. I was like, why are we not going to LA? But okay. Come to Austin. Absolutely love it. I was like, wait, this is like where I need to be. Like, I was like, great, September 2021, I'm moving to Austin. Didn't have a job that was lined up that was here. Didn't have any like reason to actually like live here other than that I wanted to live here. So the whole kind of year I was in Seattle, I was like setting up and gearing up for like, okay, what does it look like to move to Austin? Because being here was my, like, in that weekend, I found such a happy place and felt myself and felt at peace and felt like, oh, I can see myself having balance here. Like, unlike living in the city, like, it was just such a different experience where I just like felt happier. And I was like, I'm going to go to where makes me happy. Yeah. And so ended up like getting a job at Outdoor Voices, working on their like marketing side of things. And my biggest thing there was like, I was like, okay, Ngozi, you don't need to make 2 dual changes at the same time. So let's like find a new job. So worked at Outdoor Voices for 2 years, but at the time was working. And I was like, let's get a new job. Let's stay in Seattle for X amount of months, like March to September, so that you are making one change at a time and you're not feeling overwhelmed. So I worked remote from March to September at home. And then I moved to Austin, September 2021, and was working for Outdoor Voices, and like absolutely like loved my time there. And I was there for 2 years, but like, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going and this is what I need to do to get there. And that was kind of how I ended up in Austin. I've been here for almost 3 years. So 3 years in September.
And in 3 years, you've built quite the community. And I know you founded this run club.
Yeah.
And I feel like now every time I'm out, I always see you in like the same circles. Austin is a really great space to be able to rebuild your life and build this whole new friendship circle. But when you first got here, did you have any of those same feelings, or were you just at so much more peace with yourself that it was easier to transition?
I think I knew myself a little bit more. And I think that was the key of, I always say this, if I would have moved to New York 3 years later, I probably would have been a completely different person, and it would have been a completely different experience. But like, coming out of college, you just don't really know who you are and what you like to do and what you're passionate about. And like, having that founded passion to begin with and then moving to a new city, it just ignited that passion in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think moving, I like had my best friend Gabby, who already lives here, and so that was nice. And then people here in Austin are just so friendly, and like you could go to a workout class and make a new friend and you guys could be besties like within 5 seconds. So like, I've like generally like the culture here helped me to feel more at home and at peace with my move too, and like feel like I could be my own person and like unapologetically myself, and it was accepted. So yeah.
That's huge. That's an important place to be. And I also feel like when you accept yourself fully, it's really easy to show up authentically as yourself, so you build these deeper relationships.
Yeah.
And you doing that work on yourself in your early 20s has obviously paid off in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of our listeners, even right now, that they're wanting to fully get to know themselves. They want to do that work, but they synonymously either want to make a crazy change in their life, or they feel like they should be doing something different. And there's a lot of pressure. If you could speak to like your younger self when you were in your early 20s and really struggling there, what do you think would have been helpful for you to hear at the time?
I think the biggest thing that would have been helpful, and I knew this, but like to really know that like you're not failing, you're either succeeding or you're learning. And like, moving out of New York wasn't a failure. And I think that was what was holding me back for so long. Like, I was in New York for 6 months, but I probably should have moved at 3. Like, but I stayed there because I was like, if I move, I'm going to be seen as a failure. Like, I couldn't conquer this city, and I couldn't like conquer this job, and I couldn't work in beauty. Instead of been like, no, this was a learning experience. I learned so much about myself in those 6 months. New York wasn't for me, and that's okay. And like, approaching that to every decision in life is so important, of knowing like, you in a lot of ways are steering your own ship. Like, no one else is this like steering your ship outside of like your mom's not steering your ship. Like, for me, it was the pressure of like, what are like people around me gonna think? What are my classmates gonna think? What are my friends gonna think? What are my parents gonna think? Like, but realistically, they're not living my life. So I had to like really reason and come to terms with myself of like, I am the one who's steering my ship and living my life. So like, if I need to make a change, I'm making a change for myself. And if I allow other people's thoughts or opinions of me to steer my ship, I will not be happy. Like, I just will not be happy. And it's important to like find that happiness from within and like steer your ship.
Preach. Yeah. My mom says all the time, you are the captain of your ship.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're right. Once you like make that mental shift where you're like, it is my life.
Yeah.
Why am I living according to fear of what other people were? In reality, like, there is a lot of pressure from peers and from family, but I feel like when you hit a certain age, they just start looking at you as like an adult. Yeah. Almost. And it's like, you do you. Like, I did my part to like
got you where you need to be. Like,
exactly.
Steer your ship.
Steer your ship and like go sail away.
Yeah. And what's funny is my mom would always like, when I was thinking about leaving New York, and I think the pressure too in the like Nigerian culture is like mental, you're too blessed to be stressed. Like, and I come from a faith background. So like the aspect of you're too blessed to be stressed was something that like I felt like I didn't have the capacity to say like, no, I'm actually anxious and I'm depressed. And these are two things that actually need to be worked out. And like, this environment is heightening those things and I need to leave. And like, it came to a point where I was like calling my mom. I'm like, Mom, what should I do? And she's like, I can't tell you what to do, because like, irregardless of what I say, you're going to maybe do the opposite, or you're going to be angry by my answer. So like, you need to take ownership yourself and do what's best for you. And I think that serious conversation helped me too, to be like, no, you know what? I need to do this for myself. I need to steer my own ship. Like, I'm an adult, and like, my mom is so helpful. I call my mom all the time, but like, so helpful. But at the same time, I'm the one living my life. So yeah.
And you brought up your faith. Faith is very important to me as well. And I felt like when it came to like the faith part of my life, I was disconnected from that when I was really struggling with anxiety and depression, because it was the same kind of idea that like, I shouldn't have a reason to be stressed or anxious, or I should be able to like just snap out of it, and I can't. And once I felt like I could like come to terms with the fact that that's just kind of part of who I am. And that's okay. Like, I feel like every avenue of my life, including faith, really increased, you know, like I just felt more accepted overall. Do you think that because of your faith background as well, was that something you kind of like hit away from?
I think so. Like, cause my dad was a pastor growing up. So I was a PK.
You're a pastor's kid.
And so I feel like depression and anxiety were things that we didn't talk about in our household. And I also think like this aspect of also coming from like, my dad's Sierra Leonean, my mom's Nigerian. So like an immigrant background there too, of like you're blessed, like with the life that you've been given, and like everything is supposed to, like, you have a hope and like a deeper reason in being. And that aspect of like, even having that hope, you can still feel those feelings, and that's okay, I think was my biggest like hurdle of like, I'm like, well, I have this hope in like Jesus, and I have like a reason for being, but like, I'm still feeling these things. And I felt like I had to be the light. I had to be happy all the time, and I had to be excited, and I had to have everything going on, and I had to have everything together, because like there's so many other people that like are struggling in different ways that I'm privileged in a lot of ways. So it was like one of those things where I always was like reasoning with like, similar to what you said, like I have a lot of things that are going well, like why, like I can't be depressed, or I can't be anxious. And I think for so long that bogged me down, where I was like, I'm feeling all these emotions. I feel like I'm being told, or I'm putting on myself, that I can't have these emotions. So like, where do I go? Like, what does that look like? Where, like, what's my outlet? And I didn't have one. So yeah.
I love how outspoken people are just now getting about mental health and destigmatizing mental health and being able to talk about it in a way that is just normal. Because I have never met another human being that's like, I've never felt anxious. I've never felt depressed. I am 100% good. Like, mental health just doesn't faze me. Where once we started just like talking about it and normalizing it more and more, it just really became part of like the flawed human experience. That like, it doesn't discredit faith in any way, but it also doesn't discredit that you could be going through some hard stuff that is still hard stuff, because that's your reality. You know, and I try all the time to like not compare, but especially when it comes to like hard stuff, that's where I go, where I'm like, well, it's hard, but like, it's not that hard. Like, people are struggling more than I am. And one of the things I learned in therapy was that it was like, you can't compare your struggles, especially because somebody will always have it better. Somebody will always have it worse. Somebody will always like, you can't. And that's still something that I like struggle with vocalizing when I'm going through something, because I'm like, yeah, well, maybe it's not that bad.
Or like not wanting to burden people.
I think
that's huge. Of like, even like my senior year of college, I found out my dad was was dealing with a lot of like mental health, but also like he ended up being diagnosed with AFTD, which is frontotemporal dementia. So like FTD. And at the time we didn't know what it was. There was just like so many things going on. But I was like, you're at the top. I was at the top of my game in terms of graduating college, super excited, but like so many things were going on. And I didn't want to burden anybody else with that, because I was like, well, I've always been known as like the high energy, the light, the like outgoing one. Like, I have to live up to that standard, and like not really knowing where to go with that, again, with that like like everyone is going through their own struggles, and I would constantly compare my struggle to someone else's of like, well, this is not that bad. Like there's other people that are suffering more, instead of like giving myself the space and place to know that like, no, it's okay. Like this is my struggle and that's okay. And like, it's okay to feel these things.
Yeah. And it's interesting that sometimes it's like the brightest lights, the happiest people that are struggling the most. And like the phrase of like, check on your strong friends came to mind when you were talking about something that is very big in your personal life and not feeling like you can really fully process or talk about that because you don't want to burden people.
Yeah.
And I think both can be true. You can still be a light and still be struggling with darkness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you kind of found a better balance with that, or is that still something that you're struggling with?
Yeah, I feel like it's something that I like learned. Like you can still like grief and like happiness or excitement about something are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's something that I always struggled with, where I was like, it's either I'm happy or I'm sad. Like it's okay to live in a world where you feel both, and like both can be accepted. And I feel like it's an everyday practice for me to like know that it's okay. And like I have people in my life that are like, Ngozi, how are you actually doing? Like how are you? And it's funny because my friends will know that I think social media is an insight into like how my mental health is going a lot of times, because when I was a freshman in college, I used to be so like, I consider Instagram my art. Like I feel like it's a creative outlet for me, and I used to post all the time. Like leading up to college, my freshman year, I was so depressed and anxious, I wasn't posting on Instagram, and all my friends knew something was wrong because I was like, oh, she's not posting on Instagram. She's like, this is her creative outlet. Like something's going on there. Like she needs to be checked on. And it's funny because most people are like, well, you posting a lot for me sometimes also is sometimes where I'm like, okay, this is like an exciting time. Like sometimes I feel a crash after, and like my friends are like, okay, so how are you actually doing? Because your life looks insane. So what's going on? Like what's the underlying thing you're not talking about here? So I have those people in my life that like, I mean, I'm so grateful for, that will like actually give me a reality check up where they're like, no, like actually what's going on? Like what's happening? How are you feeling? How are you doing? What does the situation look like? Because so often I won't talk about it because I'm like, nope, I am just like, I'll talk about it, but I don't want to burden people. So I think it's like you learn, and it's like a push and pull. Totally. Sometimes I'm like completely open. Other times it's like I have to kind of be prompted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you have those safe spaces in your life too, and like a handful of dedicated friends that like know you.
Yeah.
That are comfortable and you're comfortable talking to about that stuff. Where another thing, when I first started like kind of exploring this idea, I feel like I would like trauma dump, where like someone would ask me and I'm like, well, do you really want to know like here it all is?
Yeah.
And it's like, not everybody deserves to know like the lengths of your story.
Yeah.
That just because you're not always opening up, and I think I say this more towards like the social media realm, that we have kind of tiptoed in an area that it's like, well, if you're not showing up completely vulnerable and sharing everything online, then that's not authentic, or you're not being real, where not everybody deserves to know what's really going on. So there's that balance of like, remember to not only be nice because everybody is struggling with something, but also like don't judge just by what people are showcasing. Yeah.
And you have to protect your energy and your peace. I always like, that is something in the last 3 years that I've been like, I'm protecting my energy and my peace. Like, cause you're so right. Not everyone deserves access to that. And not everyone is going to also intentionally like wish the best for your energy and your peace. So like you truly have to protect it and know who you can let into those safe spaces. And like having a therapist like truly has changed my life, because it's like someone that you feel safe, so safe speaking to, and like the purpose of therapy in a lot of ways sometimes is to trauma dump. So you can't trauma dump on your therapist, and that's great. And it then like allows you to express those things and like feel like you have a space to do so, and you're not trauma dumping on other people. But also knowing that like your friends are not just your friends for your happy times. Your friends are your friends through it all. And like the importance of feeling safe to be able to like express those things to them too is like something that I've really learned. Like, nope, we're all season friends. We're not just like happy season friends.
Yep. And those friends are ones you hold on to because they're going to ride the wave with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
All the waves. All the waves.
All the waves. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of them,
Yeah.
trust me. Especially like, I feel like I look back at my 20s and I look at like the different circles and the different friendships that I had then. And I'm so grateful for like the seasonal friends
Yeah.
that I had. But then I look at the people that like really know the depths of everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys are special.
Yeah.
Like, you've been along for the ride.
Yeah, you've seen it all.
Seen
And
it
that's what
all.
I think is just so great too, even about friendships, of like having those like lifers that truly have seen it all. And there's moments where you like probably weren't as close as you could have been, but like you were all going through things, but like you're able to come back together and like express those things and work through those things. And I remember one of my friends had said like, I'd rather like have an argument with you or work things through with you because that means we're getting closer than like not. So like the aspect of having those seasonal friends and like having like times where you're maybe not getting along, but like you're still there to support each other. And I am so grateful for my lifers because I'm like, you guys have really seen it all. You've seen every stage of Ngozi, every stage, like truly.
The track baddies.
Yeah, the track
through
Betty
and through.
Ngozi, you've seen like every stage of her.
I
Like,
love it.
Yeah.
Now, something I like to end our episodes with, because I've noticed that women particularly have a really difficult time like pausing
Yeah.
and vocalizing something that they're proud of themselves for.
Yeah.
So whether it's personal or professional, what's something this week that you are really proud of yourself for?
Oh, I love that. I would say I'm proud of myself this week for having the courage to speak up when things are overwhelming. I feel like that's something that's really hard for me sometimes because I feel like when you're high achieving, you're like, nope, I got it all figured out and everything's great. I don't need help with anything. But I feel like last week, I was like overwhelmed and I was like, raised a white flag and was like, no, you know what, Ngozi, you're overwhelmed with this. You need to say something and you need to be honest with yourself and like take time for yourself and like take a reset. So I would say that's what I'm proud about myself for.
Good for you.
Thank
I love
you.
that answer. Now, if our audience wants to find you and keep up with you on social media, where do they find you?
They can find my Instagram, Ngozi Musa, NGOZIMUSA. I'm on TikTok. I haven't TikToked in like 3 weeks, but like for the mental health, I had to stop.
Feel that.
And you can find my run club that I co-host, Your Mother's Run Club, on Instagram too. So yeah,
I'll link everything in the show notes.
Amazing.
Thank you, Ngozi.
Thank you for having
Appreciate
me.
you.
This was so great.
That was so fun.
It's so
I'm
fun.
like, I need